Welcome to Capitol Hill. It was perhaps a day where the former US Defence Secretary Donald Rumsfeld would have felt quite at home. There was a lot of talk about known unknowns, about a report that hasn't been released and its impact on a carbon price that hasn't been announced. There's a little more certainty about the future for interest rates. They may be on their way up, but less certainty for 2 boatloads of asylum seekers who have arrived at Christmas Island, but their future destination is unknown. To discuss the known unknowns and maybe even a few unknown unknowns, I've been joined in Melbourne by Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg and in Canberra by Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Lyndal. Hi, Sarah.
Sarah, if we can start with the carbon price. We don't know what the carbon price will be. Is it helpful to discuss where it might end up in a few years?
Well, look, part of the acceleration of whatever price is first put there is obviously part of the discussion of the committee. And we've seen today the parts of the report being leaked out. If we want to transition from coal to gas, it's going to need to be, in the report's point of view, although we haven't seen it yet, $40 a tonne at least. And we know if we want to transition right through to renewables, it's going to have to be in the vicinity of $100 a tonne. But that's of course not on the table. What we know we need to be discussing is not just the price, but also then the complementary measures, because we need all of those things. We need the entire package to make this work. We need to be ensuring that we're putting in a gross feed-in tariff. We need to make sure we can scrap the fossil fuels subsidies, because that is just going to undermine everything. And of course, let's talk about the idea of where a starting price should be, but then the next issue is going to be at what type of acceleration that price goes with.
Josh, Tony Abbott's speculated a lot in recent weeks about the likely impact of a carbon price. Is it really fair, though, to speculate on the impact of a carbon price that nobody knows yet?
Look, this is government-commissioned research, $40 a tonne, and it's quite a revelation. I mean, that price on carbon would lead to an increased burden on families and households of more than $1,000 a year. That's more than $44 a fortnight. And there we have Sarah talking about $100 a tonne, and Christine Milne was out there this morning on ABC Radio saying that $40 wasn't high enough. So let's stop beating around the bush.
We're not talking about the starting price. But let's stop beating around the bush,
Lyndal. Lyndal, we shouldn't stop beating around the bush. Starting price, ending price. You know, Christine Milne talks about escalators. I mean, the point is, Australian families are doing it tough right now. Electricity prices are up more than 50% in the last year or so. Water up 45%, gas up 30%, and you've got the Greens, who are modern-day Luddites, who are out there saying, well, let's put $100 a tonne or $40 a tonne. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Let's be realistic about Tony Abbott's plan. You know, the direct action plan is going to cost Australian taxpayers, if it was to come into force, and
$1 billion a year, Sarah.
Yeah,
$1 billion a year. And how much is yours going to collect and hand out?
$4.5 billion over the next forward estimates alone would be the cost of Tony Abbott's plan. And because you're not going to be raising any revenue, that's going to have to come straight from the budget. Now, of course, this is a budget that Tony Abbott says, oh, we want to be back in surplus. Okay, well, where are you going to cut $4.5 billion? Is Tony Abbott going to start shutting down the schools and the hospitals in Geelong? And talk about the other industries. Tony Abbott's plan is going to cost Australian taxpayers $4.5 billion just
Sarah,
in this term.
This is just an excuse for the Greens to redistribute wealth, and I don't know why you don't come clean with the Australian public about this. I mean, this is political quicksand for Julia Gillard. Here we have Greg Combet out there today saying, oh, it's going to be below $40, but that will be the starting price. Well, we're not just interested in the starting price, we're interested in the end price and the impact that this is going to have on families.
So I can tell you what you're not interested in. The Liberal Party are not interested in tackling climate change. You want to be upfront and frank about it.
I thought just before it was about the budget. Sorry, I thought you just talked about before budget.
If I could just interject for a moment. Sarah, you've talked about, as has your leader and deputy leader, talked about the other things you want from this carbon price. But isn't the reality that those will come possibly only over time, because the country simply can't afford to shut down the coal industry and shut down the wealth it gets from coal exports?
Well, the idea of coming up with the package, so we need to be putting a price on carbon. We need to make sure that the revenue that's raised by that doesn't just go back to compensating the big polluters. We need to make sure that there's enough money there to support households. But we also need to make sure we quarantine enough to go back into the renewable energy sector, because that is the next step. We need to make sure those complementary measures are there. If we don't, then we will just be arguing on Tony Abbott's terms about a price. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. We need to make sure we tackle climate change, put in a price, put in the signal, and then make sure the money that's raised goes towards the solution.
Josh, does your plan over time see a much lesser role for the coal industry?
Look, we see an important role for the coal industry as an electricity generator, and we have a plan to actually make for cleaner coal, for using out of gas-fired power stations and using the waste and the carbon dioxide
at the cost of $4.5 billion from taxpayers.
But no, we're actually talking about a cleaner system, but also a more affordable and effective system.
Where are you going to get the cuts from?
Not one
What are you going to cut in the budget?
Not one that's going to shut down industry. Not the one that's going to shut down industry. I mean, let's be honest here. Sarah's party does not believe in free trade agreements. They do not believe in commerce as we know it. They do not believe in industry. They believe in higher taxes. And what we are talking about is a more effective way to tackle climate change in an affordable way that won't punish households. And the Greens, well, they just worry about their own political base and not worry about the great mass of Australian families who are suffering under higher interest rates and higher costs of living.
If we could move on to that question of interest rates, the Reserve Bank put out its statement on monetary policy. Josh, it says that the economy is going to grow while the government is contracting the budget. There will be pressure on inflation. Is that not simply the price you pay for having a growing economy?
No, the price you pay for wasting money and spending more than you have to spend is higher interest rates, and that's what we saw with the $16 billion school hall or the $3 billion pink bat scheme. Now we have in the budget these handouts for set-top boxes. Look, this government has wasted money. And is living beyond its means. It squandered a $70 billion surplus when it came to government, and now we're going to have $100+ billion of debt. They're spending $135 million a day and $1 billion a month just to fund that debt. And I just think, that this government needs to be much more fiscally responsible. And if you do that, Lyndal, you'll put a downward pressure on interest rates. And, our economy in 2007 was the envy of the world, but the way this government has squandered it under pressure from the Greens and others to spend money hand over fist is leading up to this upward pressure on interest rates.
Sarah, would you wear tougher government budget cuts if it meant that people were saved from interest rate rises in the future?
Well, of course, we have this debate almost every election, don't we? Each of the major parties goes out and said, "Oh, we will promise to bring down interest rates." It's not. No government can promise that. What the government needs to do is make sure. What the government needs to do is make sure their budgets are in order. And what we've seen from the coalition, of course, is Tony Abbott in his budget reply speech give nothing in order to figure out how on earth he's going to get back to surplus. No details in there about where the cuts are really going to come from. And what we know is there's now an even bigger black hole, $4.5 billion for his direct action on a 5% reduction target. I mean, talk about fiscally responsible. The coalition are all over the shop.
If we could move on now to the question of asylum seekers, while Julia Gillard isn't getting the refugee processing centre that she originally promised, it does seem that the government is close to a deal with Malaysia and that other countries like Thailand are interested. Josh, is the government actually beginning to deliver a solution for asylum seekers that it promised to deliver?
Lyndal, that's a laughable question. This government has been an absolute failure. It was actually Julia Gillard who said in opposition, another boat meant another failure. We've had over 10,000 unauthorised arrivals come here since 2008. The government has built more detention beds in Australia than hospital beds over its term. And now we have this Malaysian solution. We have 2 boats in the last 2 days, which make up more than 10% of the 800 asylum seekers that we will be sending towards Malaysia, notwithstanding the number of asylum seekers that we will be welcoming from Malaysia here.
But isn't that the first step along the road of asylum, people smugglers not being able to guarantee asylum seekers will be processed in Australia?
This policy is a failure from start to finish. I just cannot understand while Julia Gillard doesn't pick up the phone to the President of Nauru. She went with this false argument that Nauru was not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. Well, lo and behold, Malaysia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. But so-called, that's her saving grace, and it's not working. This policy is failing every day with another boatload, and the Australian people are fed up, and she'll pay a high price at the ballot box for this failure.
Sarah, the government has said it's seeking assurances from Malaysia on the treatment of asylum seekers when they go there. Is that enough?
Well, of course, we still haven't seen what those assurances are. I keep asking the government to release their legal advice to suggest that they can even do this. And we now see two boatloads of people being held in a legal black hole on Christmas Island. No one knows exactly where they're going to go. There is no signed deal with Malaysia. There is no signed deal with Papua New Guinea. So these poor people are left indefinitely on Christmas Island wondering what their future holds. We're not even going to start processing their claims in the meantime. And it is not the way.
What's your answer,
it is
Sarah?
not the
What's
way
your answer to stopping the boats? What's your answer to stopping the boats?
My answer is that we need to be assessing people's claims as they arrive here on the mainland. But one of the other things that we would do is to increase, as your leader has actually said in negotiating deals with independents in the House, let's double our refugee intake. Well, the Greens' position, the Greens' position is that we need to be resettling more of those people directly from transit countries. But that shouldn't come at the cost of the rights of people under the convention and the obligations that Australia has for those that do reach our shores. We can't pretend that somehow these aren't people in the centre of this and we can play them off against each other. These are people. Some of the people on the boat yesterday were children. You know.
But do you believe it is important to stop people making that often dangerous journey to Australia?
Absolutely, we think that we need to provide better pathways for people, and one of the key things that the government can be doing is resettling some of those people directly. Many of the people who board boats out of desperation are people who have already been assessed by the UNHCR, whether it is in Malaysia or in Indonesia, are already there and are desperate to be resettled. And because Australia has such a small quota in terms of what we take of humanitarian intake, those people are left for years and years in slaughter.
What's your deterrent, though, to more and more people coming here in an unauthorised manner? That's the key question.
No, Josh.
How do you deter people from coming here? Because millions of people want to legitimately come here for a better life.
Well,
and
that's the
issue at hand
Josh?
here.
That's the issue at hand, Sarah. That's the issue the Liberal Party want to push, because the coalition continues to get
a human cost and an economic cost.
And Sarah?
Josh, the whole point that the coalition wants this debate to flourish, and they want the hysteria in the debate, is so that you can continue to push the myth that there are millions of people wanting to come to Australia. The history doesn't show that. History shows that the small amounts of people that come to Australia, in comparison to the rest of the world, we have a process. They come here, we process their claims, we deal with them. If they're in need of genuine protection, welcome them in. If they're not, we send them home.
And with that, both Josh Frydenberg and Sarah Hanson-Young, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Lyndal. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Lyndal. Thanks, Sarah.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill today.